Well, good evening, Miller Kelton area, and to our partners at the city. I'm Mo Wright with the Blueprint Outreach team, and we're going to get the meeting started now. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today in just a moment, but I do want to go to a few housekeeping items. At this point, everyone should be muted, and so we're going to ask that you stay on mute just to reduce the background noise. There will be a Q&A period toward the end of today's presentation where you can ask questions specific to the overview that the presenters will go through today. We also would ask that there is a need for you to ask a question in that time. You use the raise hand feature and we can recognize you at that point. You do that if you aren't Zoom experts by now, having probably done this 1,000 times in the last year. You can click the participants button on your app and there should then be a raise hand feature. We will see those hands and call you by name to recognize you to make any comments or questions at the appropriate time. So we'd love for you to bear with us as we do that, just to kind of keep the meeting orderly. There's a good amount of content tonight. It's all about level setting you on what the plans for Miller Kelton for this important project we call Blueprint Columbus is all about. And so tonight we'll do a number of things to kind of both increase your education about what's coming, as well as allow you to get a general overview of the project in general. I will say at the outset that a number of property-specific questions will not be answered today, but we will be able to take those calls and emails to both our engineering team and our outreach team to be able to get you appropriate answers. But we will be able to speak to anything that is project-specific, but not necessarily individual property questions on tonight. But those are always available to send to us via phone and email, and we'll share that information again throughout the course of the evening. We also invite you to use the chat feature during our Q&A if you so choose, and so that feature will remain open and available throughout the course of tonight's public meeting for the Miller Kelton area. Next slide, please. So as I said, this is a 90% design meeting for the Miller Kelton area. We will talk about those project boundaries. We know that there are a number of other sub-neighborhoods within the area that's defined as Miller Kelton for the Blueprint project. And so we will talk you through exactly what the geographic boundaries are tonight, as well as the plans for those individual communities and neighborhoods that are represented tonight. Glad to see all the interest tonight, and I look forward to you getting the information and then sharing it with your colleagues. We will be posting the presentation from tonight on the website and making it available for you to share with your neighbors because we want to make sure this information does get distributed as widely as possible as we continue to engage with community in this project. We are at the point in the project where design is fairly complete, and it's all about telling you what the schedule will look like, where there are specific areas we'll be focusing on, either with green infrastructure or some other type of basin or regional basin. We'll talk about what all that means in the middle, and I've got some good friends from both our project management teams in the city of Columbus, as well as our two design engineers who will be on to talk tonight. So throughout the course of tonight, you will hear from Greg Barden and Grace McInerney, who are project managers with the city of Columbus Department of Public Utilities, as well as Bill Lansoff from Arcaded and Matthew Kiefer from Hatch Engineering. So those will always be our presenters tonight, as well as they will recognize their individual teams as they are recognized for tonight's conversation. Next slide, please. And here's our agenda for this afternoon's conversation. We'll start just with a brief refresher of why we're even doing this. We have a problem with sanitary sewer overflows here in Columbus that we really are mandated to do something about. And so we've developed some really innovative approaches that we call Blueprint Columbus. My colleague will introduce the project, what the problem is, and then how we go about fixing it with remedies as what we call pillars of Blueprint in just a moment. So we'll talk about green infrastructure, what that means, what that will mean specific to the Miller Kelton neighborhood. So we will get into the plans for the Miller Kelton area specifically, the geographic boundaries, as well as what some of the approaches will be as a part of the project. And then we want to hear from you if there are specific questions about the approach or about any of the information we presented tonight. We want to give you an opportunity to weigh into that. And then we'll talk a little bit at the very end about next steps and what you can expect to see as the project moves out of design and into the construction phase. And so With that, I'm going to recognize my colleague at the City of Columbus, Tiffany Kahn, who will introduce you to the blueprint approach, talk a little bit about green infrastructure, and then we'll have our presenters come from there. So, Tiffany.
Thanks, Mo. I am Tiffany Kahn. I am part of the city outreach team. And I just want to go over a little bit of a refresher about Blueprint Columbus and give you a little bit of a background on what the issue is and what we're doing to take care of it. Next slide, please. So what's happening is when it rains, we have aging infrastructure and water is getting in through these damaged pipes, through cracks, leaky joints, and runoff from the roofs. Most of the rainwater is getting into the system from residential areas. And these sanitary sewers are not built to carry both rainwater and sewer water. So what happens is during large rain events, this water will back up into your basement or will overflow into rivers and streams. So this is what we are trying to solve. As you can see, again, it's just not having the capacity to take the rainwater and the sewer water at the same time. So that is essentially our issue. The water is pouring out into the river, and this is a human health concern. So, we don't want this by our families, we don't want this by our schools, and this is the issue that we're wanting to take care of. Next slide, please. Little bit of a recap. So this rainwater is getting in through these cracks. So that might be for trees. It might be because the pipe is old, it's made of clay, or the joints between the pipe that attaches to your house pipe might have a little space in it and it's getting in through there. So we're also concerned with when it's raining really heavy, the rain washing down the street is picking up a whole bunch of stuff. It's picking up trash and pollutants, it's picking up debris, things off of the brakes of your car, just any old thing that's on the street and rushing down, going into the storm sewer, and eventually makes it out into the river. So all in all, our water that's getting to the river is not the cleanest and it is not the healthiest for us. Next slide. So what Blueprint is trying to do is solve this issue at its root cause. So we could build bigger pipes and then that would have the capacity to take the rainwater and the sewer water. But why would we do that? And eventually we'd have to build more pipes or bigger pipes in the future and keep solving the problem that way. So what we're looking to do is start from the beginning at the root source of the issue and get that water to go where we want it to go. So separate this water to get to the storm sewer if it needs to be, and then the sanitary water to go to the treatment plant where it's supposed to be as well. So we are investing in fixing our existing infrastructure rather than building new infrastructure. What this does is create opportunities to actually improve the water that is making it to the river or the stream. And all of the pieces of Blueprint, which you'll see in just a second, work together to move the water, like I said, where we want it to go. So we want it to go out to the street instead of be around your house. We want to treat it with green infrastructure so that it is actually cleaner when it gets to the river. And we want to involve the community in this. We're trying to improve the rivers. We're trying to help the neighborhood leave something good behind for the neighborhood and also the local economy. So we use local contractors, designers, engineers, as much as we possibly can so that we're investing back into the local economy. Next slide, please. Blueprint is going to be and is in 21 different project areas throughout the city of Columbus. So as you can see here, they're kind of scattered around, and the one thing that they have all in common is separate sanitary and storm sewer systems. So that blank space in the middle, kind of downtown and up through Upper Arlington, has a combined sewer system, and that's why Blueprint is not involved there. So this is a long project. It's at least a 30-year project, and we'll make our way through all of these project areas. We started up in Clintonville 1. We broke ground in North Linden 1. We're doing construction there currently. And then moving on here to the Hilltop in Miller Kelton, and then 5th by Northwest. We will proceed throughout there, and these are done in a specific order according to how many sewer overflows are happening, where they're happening, and kind of just the intensity that it is occurring. So that's how we choose. Next slide, please. The 4 pillars of Blueprint all work together to accomplish our goal of moving the water where we want it to go. So we have lateral lining, roof water redirection, sump pumps, and green infrastructure. We'll go through these in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. Lateral lining might be the most crucial part of our project. So what we're trying to do with the lateral lining is seal up the system. So that's where the water is getting in the most in these residential sanitary laterals. So what we want to do is check out all the laterals in a project area, see what the condition of them is. If we can clean them and line them, we'll do that. So we send a balloon-like structure up the lateral. It's got resin on the outside. When that resin cures, it's hard like a pipe. So it's like a brand new pipe inside of that lateral, and it does not allow the tree roots to get in, and it helps prevent cracks and leaks, thereby sealing up the system. So it's a really great property value, but it also really helps us keep that water going where it should be going and out of where it doesn't need to be. Next slide. Roof water redirection. This is one of our tools to move the water away from the house. So we're sealing up the system with lateral lining. Roof water is taking all that water that's coming onto your roof and trying to get it out to the street where it needs to go. So some of our downspouts splash onto a splash pad like you can see in the picture, but that doesn't help because it's just sitting around your foundation. It might seep into your basement or seep into that lateral that's underneath there. So what we're trying to do is get those downspouts at least 7 feet away from your house and out all the way to the street, like you can see in the bottom picture, where possible. We like to tie that into our rain gardens and impervious pavement if possible, so we can send that water to the green infrastructure and help it to be cleaner when it eventually makes it to the storm sewer. Next slide. Sump pumps are also helping us route the water away from our foundation. And this is I think probably one of the most exciting parts for residents is that houses in the project area, if the duplex or a single family home that does not already have a sump pump, has a basement, and we're able to put one in, can get one free of charge from our project. So what we're trying to do here is some of our older houses have the foundation drain connected to that sanitary lateral. All that water is going straight out to where we don't want it to go. So when we put in the sump pump, we try to disconnect that and connect it to the sump pump so that the water goes out to the street where it's supposed to go. It also helps with seeping in the basement. So it's kind of also a benefit to the homeowner, just to help to get water away from your house and keep your basement a little drier. The city does provide the installation, the sump pump, and a backup battery. And we are currently installing sump pumps in Miller, Kelton. So if you are interested, in the chat, you can put your name, your phone number, your address, and email, and we will sign you up for that. You can also shoot us an email. I believe we can put a link in the chat as well so that you can go straight to the link and sign up. Next slide. Today, we're going to focus on green infrastructure. So you probably want to know what's going to happen in my neighborhood. I want to make sure we know why we're doing this. Next slide. We kind of talked about it before, that when the rainwater is rushing down the street, it's picking up leaves and debris, and we don't want that, right? It's going to go into the storm sewer, it's going to end up in the river, and it's a little dirty. So if we can send this water through green infrastructure, we can actually filter out that debris and leaves before it makes it to the river, and it is cleaner when it gets there. Next slide. Green infrastructure works like a filter. So this is a cross section of a rain garden. What we see on the top are plants. They're actually native plants. We like to use native plants and pollinators, special plants that can survive in very dry conditions and very wet conditions. And you also see the mulch. But underneath all of this is layers of engineered soil. So we have sand and soil mixed, and different sizes of stone, as well as an underdrain all the way at the bottom. And what this does is allow the water to seep through all of those layers, cleaning out the filtering out the toxins and cleaning out the debris. The water that does make it to the underdrain and goes out to the storm sewer is much, much cleaner. All the rain gardens that we build have underdrains, and that is what makes them unique to a rain garden you might build in your yard yourself. Next slide. One of our other tools is pervious pavement, and it works a lot like a rain garden, just in that there's layers of rock underneath. What we see on top looks kind of like brick, but it's actually pervious porous pavement designed together with cracks, so that those cracks are filled with tiny little chips and stones, so that the water can actually drain through the street, and it drains through and down all the way through the different sizes of stones to an underdrain. And it's not pictured there, but the pervious pavement streets also have an underdrain to collect that water and take it to the storm sewer where it's supposed to go. So pervious pavement is kind of a crazy construction process, but it's really beautiful when it's done, and it helps other ways as well to calm the traffic. People driving down these pervious pavement streets tend to drive a little slower. It filters out the I'm sorry, here's somebody. Filters out the trash and debris, just like a rain garden, and it actually reduces street flooding. So it gives that water somewhere to go. It doesn't just sit there. Next slide, please. The most important part of all of this is that the city is responsible for maintaining all of the rain gardens and all of the pervious pavement streets. So currently we are maintaining them once a month, but we can do it more if needed. We use our 311 system for the residents that do live near a rain garden. If they see something that they would like us to attend to, you can file 311 service requests, and we usually make it out there within a week or so. The regular maintenance includes weeding, mulching, and plant care. So they check to see if the plants need replacing, how they're doing, if they're all there, if anything's missing. They remove the trash and the leaves, and then they check all of the structures like the inlets and the underdrain and the overflow structures. You can see a picture of the truck also that we use to clean the pervious pavement streets. It sweeps them, and it also can re-chip them. All right, now I will turn it over to Greg Barden. He is the project manager and the Miller-Kelton area lead. He's going to talk a little bit about the Miller-Kelton area as a whole.
Thank you, Tiffany. The Blueprint project area, Milton-Kelton, the total basin area is 342 acres. The number of residential properties that we're looking at are 1,422. If you could go to the next slide. Basically, the overall project boundary on the north side, we have I-70 and East Main Street. On the south, Livingston Avenue. On the west, 18th Street, Livingston Park. And on the east side, Nelson Road and Rhodes Avenue. For a project area of this size, we broke the project into two separate project areas, Newton Bedford and Kent Fairwood. The Newton Bedford boundary on your left, the west boundary is South 18th Street. The east boundary is Miller Avenue. The north is Newberry Street, and the south is Livingston Avenue. For the Kent Fairwood on your right, the west boundary is Miller Avenue. The east is Nelson Road. The north is East Main Street, and the south is Livingston Avenue. Looking at the stormwater drainage within this area, within the project area, a small portion of the stormwater on the western portion of the project flows south into the combined sewer system that is picked up and treated by the city of Columbus. The storm flow is also north to the I-70 stormwater drainage system. The flow is also south and east to Allen Creek. There are 9 design sanitary reliefs within the project area, 7 within the Kent Fairwood area, 2 within Newton Bedford. All of the DSRs discharge to storm sewers that discharge to Allen Creek. Their outfalls are at the 108-inch storm sewer in Kenton Avenue and the 108-inch storm sewer in north of Livingston. Looking at the reported water and basement complaints within the project area, we find that they're basically distributed across the entire project area. Next slide. Well, as indicated on the sanitary sewer overflows, we have 9 within the project area. And we track their overflows and report those to the EPA. Sanitary sewer overflows are basically have a risk of exposure to the residents, basically either through their discharge to the Elm Creek or through their backup into a basement we call water in basements. We have looked at the overall pipe conditions with the CCTV sewer inspection that was done as part of the rehab of the sanitary sewers and lining and manhole rehab. Next slide, please. Looking at the 4-pillar timeline, the rehab sanitary sewer and manholes was done and performed in 2014 under a city project annual lining contract. Regarding sump pumps, the number of homes that we want to look at in the project area are 1422. Our goal is to install 355 sump pumps, or 25% of the homes. And we're still looking for volunteers for sump pump installation. Our start date on the sump pumps was in January 2020. Currently, we've installed 173 to date. We would hope to have a second phase of sump pump installations to install at least 173 to meet our project goal. The green infrastructure timeline for construction is going to be 2022 and 2023, the startup. For the lateral lining, we hope to start in year 2024 with roof water redirection following that. Next slide, please. Okay. Basically, the selection is based on the stormwater drainage patterns and siting criteria for the proposed GI. Our proposed types of GI or locations of GI preference starts on the left and moves to the right. Our preference is land banks and parks are the preferred since they are the most efficient and least disruptive during construction. However, these are not the most feasible due to the lack of availability within a project area or their location within the project area, which means there's insufficient stormwater flow to those. The next preference would be to locate green infrastructure within the right-of-way behind the curb, which is a high preference. But again, we have to look at conflicts with utilities, water, sewer services, gas, electric, fiber. We have to look at trees, the impact to trees, the distance requirements between the rain gardens, distance requirements from intersection and driveways, offsets, existing sidewalk conflicts, or designing those for future sidewalk installation. And basically, other design criteria that limits the percentage of the lot frontage we can use for a basin. Permeable pavers are a high preference. They're very appealing in the neighborhoods. They can be disruptive during construction with impact to the residents. The cost is very expensive. And then that leads to bump outs, which are our least desirable. They, again, have the potential for conflicts because they add to the reduction in the street width at their location. They're more costly than the other types of GI, potentially the right-of-way basins. And they will also result potentially in a loss of parking. And because of their installation and loss of parking, then they will require signage and delineators in the neighborhood. But even after our available locations are somewhat determined, we still have to determine how effective and efficient all the proposed GI would be within the big picture of the project area. And so basically that's a summary of how we look at determining where the proposed GI should be in a project area. Next slide. This is our project team for the Newton Bedford project. Bill Lanzoff is our project manager with Arcadis. Philip Burtis is our senior project engineer. Vinnie Tremonte is our ecologist. Stephanie Waregraf is a project engineer, and Andy Elderbrook is a project engineer.
I think we're going to turn it over to Bill.
Yeah, I'm Bill Lanzoff with Arcadis, and I'm going to present the specific information within the Newton Bedford project area. To recap some of the general overview of the project, what we're proposing to do, we're proposing to add storm inlets. These curb inlets will be added to areas either where we observed flooding or where flooding, based on our modeling, we're anticipating a flooding to possibly occur. So therefore, we're adding additional curb inlets to remove the water from those intersections. In addition, we're proposing 3 rain gardens. These will be on land bank parcels. This gives us the opportunity to both retain the water as well as treat the water to improve water quality downstream. The last item that we were proposing to put in would be permeable pavers. The permeable pavers will be full roadway reconstruction from sidewalk to sidewalk. It will be brick-like aesthetic view. In some aspects, it will be bringing the community back to its original character. These type of amenities also provide water quality and quantity controls. Next slide, please. So the project area for Newton Bedford, I believe Greg outlined this, but this is a blown up version of it. The yellow line here we show is the project area. And within the yellow, there is a smaller subsection, which is the teal color, and that represents the Old Oaks Historic Area. So we have to meet the historic criteria within that area. So that's why that's designated that way. So to go from left or west to east, we'll be doing work on Carpenter Street, 22nd Street. The blue areas, you'll see one up at Newberry and Champion. Those represent rain gardens. And we're doing rain gardens at South Champion Street, also on Miller. We'll be putting 2 others. Additional work will be done on Linwood Avenue and Kimball Place, sorry. Next slide, please. So for a detailed breakup of the work or breakdown of the work, so Carpenter Street, we're proposing to put pavers from Stone Avenue to Newton Street. This will include new sidewalks and curbs on both sides of the street, new water line, and an additional curb inlet on Stone Avenue. On South 22nd Street, pavers will be installed or constructed from Newberry Street to Newton Street. This will also include new sidewalks and curbs on both sides of the street new water line, and a new tree lawn. The next would be on Linwood Avenue. We're proposing to put pavers from Newberry Street to East Livingston Avenue. This will include new sidewalks and curbs on both sides of the street. And since Linwood Avenue is within the historic area, they will also get sandstone curbs, and we'll be updating the tree lawn. Kimball Place, we will also be putting pavers from Galt Street to East Livingston Avenue. This will include new sidewalk and curbs on both sides of the street. The curbs will be sandstone curbs. The proposed design will maintain the historic wall that's located on Kimball Place, and will be installing or constructing a new water line. In addition, the additional storm inlets that we're proposing for the project area, and as I said previously, this is to either anticipated additional water or ponding or observed ponding, would be at Carpenter Street and Stone Avenue, Kimball Place and Newton Street, Ohio Avenue and Newton Street, Oakwood Avenue and Newton Street, Ford Street and Kent Street, and sorry, Miller Avenue and Kent Street. Next slide, please. Okay. As I said before, we're going to also construct 3 rain gardens. These rain gardens are all located at Land Bank Properties. And the first one is located at South Champion Avenue and South Newberry. This is a 2-parcel lot. And the second parcel is an acquired parcel that we were able to secure. The blue area within the basin actually shows the area of actual storage. And then the magenta located around represent walls. So in this location, we're going to have the landscaped walls as an tiered structure down to the basin wall. We'll have trees and shrubs and plants planted both in the basin and down the hillside. And then we'll also provided 3 inlets for this location. This intersection sees a lot of flooding and a lot of water coming down. So we've provided 3 inlets to capture the flow. The second rain garden site will be located at Miller Avenue, south of Kent. This is a land bank parcel. Here we'll have sloping walls for the basin, and then we'll have a head wall or a decorative wall when you come into the basin. It would be landscaped brick or landscaped stone. And then we'll have a dividing between the 2 cells of the basin. We'll have a dividing wall in between. Again, this basin will have trees, shrubs, and plants. We're providing 1 inlet to take water off of Miller Avenue. The next location is at Miller Avenue, just south of Newberry. And here we're putting, it'll be a landscaped wall the entire length of the basin. And at the head wall where it enters, we will have an inlet that will be located on 1 inlet on Miller. And again, we'll put trees, shrubs, and plants in the basin and on the side. Next slide, please. So if we take a step back and look at what has changed since the 60% plan set, back in October 2019, we submitted plans to the City of Columbus through a series of comments from both residents, other city departments, and other utilities. A series of changes were made to the plan set. The first item here is permeable pavers on Kimball Street were modified, both based on comments from the Historic Resource Commission for the Old Oaks Historic District, as well as DPS to address their concerns. We removed the tree lawn from Kimball Place and the replacement trees from Kimball Place as well. The design now is more in line with what's already there. It will be more of a substitution or replacement of existing materials. Another item was we removed the permeable pavers and waterline improvements on Bedford Avenue. This was a change in scope of work. We, based on comments from both Columbia Gas and other city departments, we removed the pavers from this section. We added grading details to Miller Avenue. We are going to try to increase the drainage flow to the rain garden on Miller. This is the one further south on Miller. We also extended Rain Garden 2, which is located on Newberry and South Champion, to occupy 2 parcels. After the 60% review committee review meetings, we were able to, a resident approached the city and offered to sell additional parcels, so we were able to expand that rain garden to cover 2 parcels. We also added additional waterline relocation at some of the other locations within the project area to address some of the offsets that are required for some infrastructure upgrades that we had to do. And the last item is we added a tree lawn to South 22nd Street to assist with some of the DPS or public service comments. We added a tree lawn to help with the design and getting everything to fit into place. As a result, it's going to add additional trees to South 22nd Street. Next slide, please. So to give you an example of what permeable paver road would look like, on the left we have a rendering of what we're proposing to do. As you can see, it's pretty much a lot, it's real similar to the existing. This is Linwood Avenue. To existing conditions, we are proposing to basically replace the sidewalk curb, the roadway from sidewalk to sidewalk. The trees themselves will be smaller at first, but we are proposing to replace all the trees, and we are proposing to give a more consistent tree lawn. Some of the tree lawn, some of the locations of the tree lawn narrow down to approximately 2 feet. Well, this will be a consistent 3-foot tree lawn through the entire length. To see an actual photo of one on the right-hand side here is a picture from Clintonville, and this gives you an example of what it's going to look like, or what actually one that's been constructed recently looks like within the city. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the rain garden at Newberry and South Champion. This rain garden, we are still in discussions with the DPS as far as the public service, as far as the inlets into the rain garden. So that design is still a work in progress. But the overall concept here, as shown, is what we are proposing in the plans. Water will come, there will be 2 inlets off of Newberry. There will be 1 inlet off of Champion. We will show a wall in here. There will be some tiered walls coming down the hillside, which are not shown in here, but this gives you a general concept of what we're proposing. We will be also planting some trees in the area, as well as some shrubs inside the basin and on the hillside. If you look on the right, this is what the existing lot looks like, and on the left is what we're proposing to do. Next slide, please. So if we take a step back, and there's some other impacts to the residents, some would call them improvements to a lot of the infrastructure in there that once we get in there, we'll have to update and make changes. So I just want to go down through a list here and give you an idea of what additional work is coming. So with the aged water line, there are several locations where we suspect there to be lead water services. We will where we're replacing the water line, we will use this opportunity to replace those lead services. Curb cuts. We are also proposing on where we're replacing the curb. So this would be all locations where we're putting permeable pavers to provide 2 curb cuts for each property. This will allow to tie in existing either downspout redirections or some pump discharges into a curb cut that will be provided under the sidewalk. Also, in the future projects, when there will be downspout relocations, this will give a location for the downspout to be relocated to, and will prevent us from digging up a sidewalk or curb that we've already just constructed. The driveway aprons, there's not many within our project area. I think there's 3, but they will be replaced in the walkways on all permeable paver roads. We anticipate the work to require 41 right-of-way easements to do this work. And a lot of these are because we're putting in 44 stairs to be replaced. This, in the most section, this will be that first set of stairs. Not everybody will be getting a stair replacement, but where there's locations where we need to meet ADA standards, we will be replacing stairs to address those needs. We are also proposing 31 retaining walls. Some of these are in locations, or most of these are in locations where there already are retaining walls that we will need to take out. And then but a majority of these are the curb walls. So the difference between a curb wall and a block wall, the curb wall is similar to the curb in front of your sidewalk, except for this curb will be on the back side of your sidewalk, and this helps hold the soil back off the sidewalk. For larger drop-offs or change in elevation off the back side of their sidewalk, we will use a block wall. So we're only proposing 5 block walls and 26 curb walls. As a result of doing the work also in the intersections, we are responsible to update the ADA ramps, and we're proposing to replace or update 29 ADA ramps to make them ADA compliant. As also another item is that as we go through the project, items or objects located within the right-of-way, they will be removed. There'll be notification sent out to the residents, but this would include fences, shrubs, bushes. Those items that are in the right-of-way are subject to being removed because they're encroaching on the right-of-way and on the work limits. But the city will notify you in advance of those and what needs to be done. Next slide, please. The city has a requirement when we take out trees and that we replace the trees. And this is an executive order that the mayor signed several years ago. And the replacement policy says basically, if there's 25% of the critical root zone that's impacted, then we should remove the tree because the likelihood of dying is significantly increased. The tree could die off immediately, or it could be several years down the road. So as a precaution, we would do is remove the tree as part of the project. Once we remove a tree, then we have to meet the requirements within the policy, the city's policy. Meaning that if the tree, here on the left-hand side, the tree's trunk diameter is less than 12 inches, it's a 1-to-1. The replacement tree is 2.5 inch diameter tree. So if it's between 12 and 18 inches in diameter, we have to provide 2 trees for every one of those type of trees that we take out. And as you go down the list, you can see 18 to 24 is a 3-to-1, 24 to 30 is a 4-to-1, and anything greater than 30 inches is 5-to-1. So when you look at the numbers down here at the bottom, you'll see that the tree removal the tree removal proposed for our project area is 59 trees. That when we go through the analysis to determine what the replacement number would be, we will have to replace 95 trees or install 95 trees. Our plans right now call for 84 trees to be provided in our project area. And these 84 would be located within the rain gardens, street trees along Linwood Avenue and 22nd Street. As a result, we're going to have an additional trees, 11 additional trees where we need to plant. Our goal is to plant those within the project area and plant those down at Driving Park. Next slide, please. Next, Matt Kiefer will discuss Hatch's project, Kent Fairwood.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Hey, Bill. Bill, before we move from you, just a quick question we had, which was around the Linwood, and when we put the permeable pavers in, is that going to make the street wider, more narrow, or is it about going to be pretty much the same?
All the permeable paver roads will be the same footprint. We're not changing the footprint. The curbs will be in the exact same spot for all the streets. Mm-hmm.
Very good. All right, Matt, take us away. Thank you, Bill.
All right, thank you, Mo. And thanks, Bill. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Kiefer, and I'm with Hatch, and we're the design engineer responsible for the Kent Fairwood improvements. And our team's working really closely with Grace McInerney, who is the City of Columbus project manager for this area. And we're really excited to share with you the latest updates on the progress we've been making since our last meeting. Next slide. So as many of you know, the Kent Fairwood area is shown here just east of the Newton Bedford area. So again, we are bounded by Miller Avenue to the west, East Main Street to the north, the railroad tracks to the east, and Livingston Avenue to the south. Next slide. So the Kent Fairwood project area that I described is quite large, and like Greg had mentioned previously, it covers about 260 acres with over 900 residential homes and over 200 commercial, industrial, or institutional properties. And stormwater in this area does not just flow to one general direction towards a single outfall. The stormwater actually flows to multiple outfalls. And so in our Kent Fairwood area, we had to utilize a range of green infrastructure options in order to capture all of that flow and achieve our water quality and water attenuation goals. And these BMPs fall into 4 categories, which are regional rain gardens, bump out rain gardens, behind the curb rain gardens, and permeable pavers. Next slide. So this graphic shows how the BMPs are spread throughout the project area, with the regional rain gardens shown in red. And these are at Lilly and Mound Street, Seymour and Cole, Kent and Seymour, Bidewee and Rhodes, and of course at Driving Park. The bump outs rain gardens are shown in yellow, and these are fairly distributed throughout the area. Our behind the curb rain gardens in blue, these are located mainly along East Fulton Street and along Galt Street. And the permeable pavers in magenta and green are located mainly along Bulin Avenue. Now, some of the green pavers that are indicated, these are shown along a stretch of Berkeley and a small portion on Bulin between East Main Street and East Mound Street. Now, these pavers may not be required to be constructed in order to meet our water quality goals, but we still include them in our design as backup in case conflicts would prevent the installation of other BMPs. Next slide. Our regional rain gardens are very interesting, and they offer many advantages to gray improvements beyond simply water quality benefits. These types of basins offer opportunities to beautify the neighborhoods, provide wildlife habitat, remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they also can provide passive recreation and gathering places. The slide here shows our 500 Lilly Avenue concept, which is currently an empty lot. We love to take advantage of these opportunities to enhance the neighborhood with additional plantings, trees, and vegetation, while at the same time providing a water quality benefit. The profile at the bottom shows the gentle 4-to-1 side slopes of the basin. These regional basins also allow water to enter from a combination of surface runoff as well as runoff that is piped into the basin from a street catch basin. The water filters through the sandy loam soil and infiltrates into the existing subgrade. Any excess water that does not infiltrate enters an under drain system or an overflow so that the plantings are not washed out. You might notice on this plan here, they have greenhouses labeled. And so one interesting opportunity that we have at this location is to partner with Columbus Public Health Urban Agriculture Program to launch a pilot community garden. Nothing has been finalized yet with this partnership, but more details should be forthcoming as we get closer to construction. Next slide. And here is just a rendering of the 500 Lily Avenue showing that concept. And next slide. And this is a bird's eye view of the Lily Basin that highlights the type of plantings and color that are proposed at this basin, along with the stone wall that's closest to the sidewalk. And we use herbaceous plants and pollinator plantings and ensure that the basin dries within 24 hours. These basins are not wet ponds, and they're not designed so that they hold water for prolonged periods. They are designed, again, to drain within 24 hours. Next slide. And so here we have our Bidewee rain garden, which again takes overland flow from the grass median along with street runoff. The rendering at the right shows this proposed concept. Next slide. And our next regional rain garden is located at the corner of Cole and Seymour. And this will operate similar to Lily Avenue Garden, taking overland flow from the green space and also treating runoff from Cole Street. Next slide. The regional rain garden at Kelton Seymour, again, functions very similar to Lily Avenue, and that's shown here. Next slide. So those previous regional rain gardens that we just went through, these have not really changed much from the last presentation that we gave. More or less, those designs are very, very consistent with the 60%. But what has changed quite significantly is the rain garden at Driving Park. And so I'm really excited to share with you some of those updates. Our previous design showed the basins located near the intersection of Livingston and Rhodes. We received feedback from the community that wanted to see these basins moved further towards the railroad tracks, as the intersection was really a focal point and entrance to the park. We also received feedback that the design should provide usable space and also incorporate the existing flagpole and memorial. Feedback also emphasized leaving plenty of space for sporting events like kickball and other gatherings. And so the revised concept addresses those concerns, and we were able to shift the basin from the intersection and incorporate 2 walled basins that still achieve the same water quality goals of the project. When we do move the basins closer to the railroad tracks, we are working against the drainage pattern, and that did result in the need for 2 walled basins. But having the 2 walled basins allows us to install a new connection path between the basins from Livingston Avenue to the existing path in the park. There will also be a paved seating area around the flagpole and the monument, and we have proposed additional trees along Livingston Avenue and also where the new path meets the existing. Next slide. Here we just show an overall section of the driving park. This is the Western Basin, which is 24-foot wide and has 2 step downs utilizing 18-inch high stones. Next slide. Here on the left are a couple examples of the type of natural stone that the walls would be constructed of at the regional basins. And then also on the right, you can see an example of the educational signage that will be installed. And this explains how the regional rain gardens function and what types of vegetation and wildlife that you can expect to see. Next slide. In locations where larger regional basins won't fit, and again, to capture all the flow that is present within our drainage area, we provide smaller rain gardens behind the curb and still within the city right-of-way. We use similar stacked stone in lieu of precast concrete units. And our goal with the design of the behind the curb basins is that these structures should look like landscaping features and not a stormwater facility. So that's really what we're working towards. Next slide. Very similar to the behind the curb basins in concept are the bump out street basins. These basins function the same, but they can be used where the right-of-way is too narrow to accommodate a behind-the-curb basin. Bump-out street basins are also useful to define parking regions, and also they neck down the roadway and has a traffic calming effect. Next slide. And then the last green infrastructure tool that we're utilizing on this project are permeable pavers. This system allows water to infiltrate between the paver stones, like Tiffany discussed, and it filters through the gravel subbase. Some of the flow is able to percolate into the subgrade, but most of it's just filtered and collected through under drains and then discharged into the storm system. Since we need to completely excavate the roadways to install these new permeable pavers, we are working with the Division of Water to be proactive and replace older water mains that have become brittle with time and are subject to breaking or leaking. And we have planned actually around a mile of water main replacements within this project area. Next slide. And here's a section view of the permeable pavers along Bulin Avenue. At the locations where permeable pavers are installed, just like was discussed previously in the Newton Bedford area, our sidewalks will be replaced along with some stairs and then retaining walls when needed. Next slide. And so here we just have a few slides that show the proposed renderings at our paver streets. Here is Bulin Avenue looking south from Kent Street. Next slide. And this is also Bulin Avenue, but looking south from East Fulton Street. Next slide. And here's another one at Bulin looking from East Livingston. And next slide. And then the last one here shows Bidawee looking east from Fairwood Avenue. Next slide. And so just to recap some of the major changes in the Kent Fairwood area since 2019, our behind the curb basins are now utilizing stacked stones, and some of the sizes and geometry of those basins have been updated. But most significantly, the updates have taken place at Driving Park, where we've relocated the two basins and incorporate the pathway and flagpole memorial into the design. Next slide. And very similar to the Newton Bedford area, we do have impacts at the permeable paver streets. So again, very similar. We have several easements, in this case around 57 locations, where those roadway improvements will extend slightly into the private property, in order to perform the regrading or seeding, stair replacement, or retaining walls that will need to be added or replaced. And you can see those numbers there. We're also planning significant curb ramp replacements. So in our area, nearly 100 were impacted. So, whether that was because the proposed design would interfere with the curb ramp and warrant replacement, or whether one needed to be brought up to standards. So we will be doing significant work to get those up to date. Next slide. And so one of the primary considerations that we look at during design is to avoid tree removals whenever possible. We have an arborist that evaluates every single tree on these projects. And if they can be saved, we try the best we can to do that. We're currently showing 9 trees to be removed, and we will be planting twice as many in place. And we will be adding those throughout the right-of-way and park areas where it makes sense. And so that covers the overall Kent Fairwood update. I'll hand it back to Mo to take any questions.
Great. Thank you to all of the presenters, and a lot of information there. Now it's really time to see if there are any additional questions from you. Either if you want to use the raise hand feature, feel free to do that, or you can drop those in the chat really quickly. But just to kind of recap, today was about giving you an update at what is kind of the finalization of the design plan. We pretty much every year for the last couple of years, we've been doing a public meeting, getting feedback from you around how the design is emerging. And today we kind of lay out where the design is as it moves toward the implementation. You may have questions about your specific streets or some of the renderings that you saw, and so those questions are appropriate. And if it's not something we can get into specifically tonight, as I said at the beginning, both the email and the phone number for Blueprint is on the screen there. You can at any time reach out via either of those methods to get property-specific questions answered, or if it's about a tree or something in the tree lawn or anything like that in front of your home, feel free to use it for that reason. So my team will help me in terms of their specific questions that you all have. I did see one. Andy, you had a question around clarifying if the gutters and downspouts in the area would be replaced where we're also doing permeable pavers. Design team, I'm not sure what's, looks like we're talking about on Linwood Avenue. So the design team from Linwood, obviously that's a different pillar of Blueprint. The timelines will be different, but generally speaking, I think the answer is yes, but certainly chime in with any additional information around that question from Andy. Bill, is that your area, Arcadis, at Linwood?
And Mo, I actually put a response in the group chat as well to that question.
Yeah, there's response in the group chat, so I think we're good on that.
Okay,
So
very good.
The question that was left out is regarding Bedford Avenue. Why was this street left out of the permanent paver project?
Bedford was two reasons. The first was there's a major gas main on Bedford. And then the second reason, we talked about, or early on, Greg talked about the project area having different drainage areas. One part of the project area goes to the combined sewer. And we reevaluated it with the city, and for that reason, we weren't getting as much benefit on Bedford as we would on the other streets, since it was going already to the treatment plant. The flows were already going to the treatment plant. We looked at another alternative of rearranging things, and we were able to still meet the requirements for the city project and not do the work on Bedford. We would have had a difficult time doing it anyway because there is a large gas main down there. So,
got it. Very good. Any other additional questions we can answer about the project, the overview, or the path forward for Miller Kelton?
I have a question. This is Michael Herman, Commissioner for Livingston Avenue Area Commission. And I have a question regarding the retention pond or the rain garden at the rec center at Driving Park. And the plan shows that there's what's labeled a future or a possible connector between Livingston, a sidewalk between Livingston that incorporates the memorial and then goes to the new bike path. And where is the status of that? I understand that this is not part of this project, that would actually be part of Recs and Parks budget. Is there any more update on whether that actually will happen, or whether there's communication with Recs and Parks to add that to the project?
I'll yield to Tiffany or Elena on that, but I do know those conversations are ongoing. They have certainly considered it. I believe it's in their initial thinking, but I'm not sure if a final plan around when that could happen is in place. But Tiffany or Elena, any additional thoughts around that one?
Yeah, thank you, Mel. And thank you, Mr. Herman. We don't have an update from our last meeting on Driving Park, which was kind of with our Driving Park stakeholders. But as you mentioned, we had a representative from Recreation and Parks at that meeting, Troy Uton, and he committed at the meeting to the construction of that sidewalk. It will not be included as part of our Blueprint project, but they definitely are. They definitely committed in that meeting to that sidewalk. But we can stay up to date with you as we kind of learn more when in what budget Rec and Parks is able to include that funding.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks, Elena. Thanks for the question. We also had a question around the paver installation process and how long that process is. Tiffany, are you in the position maybe to speak to that, just kind of generally speaking, or would you like to throw it to one of our engineers?
This is a fun answer, right? So I think we spoke about this out in the field as well. I think with Bill that overall we kind of say a year to 18 months to install pervious pavement, but the impact to the resident isn't intense like that for the entire time. So they start at one end of the street and they can impact 6 houses on each side or 12 houses total at one point. And so obviously there's going to be some blocking access in the front of the homes, and they can only do that for 3 weeks at a time. So they will, excavate, do their thing in front of those section of houses, and then keep going on a little bit of a rolling basis. So the construction in front of your house is not constant for that whole year and a half. It's just as a rolling basis and maybe intermittently 3 weeks at a time as they finish the road from the bottom up. I don't know if Bill or Matt want to comment any further on those comments.
Sounds like she said thank you in the chat for that one. So we did have a question as well around the trees on Linwood, and that's probably going to be a very specific. Andy, what I would suggest is maybe reach out via email to the address there about the specific addresses you're thinking about, because that'll be helpful to get a more definitive answer there. What we probably know is those trees would be impacted in some way, but if you're more concerned about specific address points there, the probably better answer would be if you submit those to us in terms of what blocks you're thinking about. We certainly can, and you did say between Newton and Livingston. So if you guys want to speak to that today, if you're in project area, folks, if you have a general answer for the day, or we also can follow up after today's meeting. Bill, any thoughts around that right away?
Sorry, say that again. Sorry.
I was just asking, do you have any immediate, that is your project area, is that right? Linwood?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just asking, do you have any immediate thoughts about the trees on Linwood and how that would be affected, or would you like us to follow up offline about specific blocks and tree effect?
I mean, if the trees in the existing tree lawn, and I saw a question on the chat that asked what the tree lawn is, so let me answer that. It's between the the curb and the sidewalk. So that area of grass right now on Linwood with trees, all those trees are going to have to be removed. Where the construction limits, even if we tried to save those trees, they would probably die just during the construction. So what we're proposing to do is take out all the trees along the tree lawn and install new trees along the entire length. If there's a specific tree that would be impacted outside, say on the back side of the sidewalk, we would have to look at specific property to see if there's any impact, if that's the question.
Wonderful, thanks Bill for that. Jason, I saw your question around the effects of the sump pump installation, or if you already currently have one and the project had some unintended consequences. Has that been addressed? Yeah, it doesn't look like it in the chat. So James, Tiffany, if you guys want to address that one in the chat, feel free to do that.
Already typing.
Via chat. Okay, I figured you were on that one already. So we'll get that one. Can we provide temporary lighting? So question around, for streets where pavers are being installed, can we provide temporary lighting for residents who may need to find alternative parking for homeowners, especially for elderly residents who might not find it as safe? I don't know how we've addressed that in the past, or if that's something we can take to it would be our construction crews at that point as a requirement. I'm not sure that's a current requirement, but it might be a request or something that we could work in, Tiffany.
Yeah, Mo, we were talking about this with the design teams, and we heard many residents bring this up when we were out and marking the basins a couple weeks ago. So in talking to I guess basically the next step is we need to have more conversation with leadership to see if this is something that we can do as far as lighting in the back. In the pervious pavement construction in the past, the construction teams have been really great about providing temporary access and getting really creative about how to get to your home so that you're not, you know, parking 7 blocks away or anything like that. So they will definitely work. We want to be aware of this. If you have specific concerns or any ideas, like, hey, there's a parking lot near us, could we utilize that? Then we can approach that, you know, owner and kind of see where we can go with it. Just any kind of creative thing that we can do, we're open to it, and we want to work with the residents to make sure you guys feel safe. Again, for those few weeks that you'll have to kind of compromise with us and park somewhere else. But we hear you and we are working on that.
And likewise, Tiffany, Elena, Chris's question in the chat specific to roadway improvements outside of Blueprint. What I'll say to you, Chris, is there's some pretty specific uses of what the money for Blueprint can go toward, unfortunately, but it does not preclude public service, who's the department that kind of oversees street installation, to be putting it on the agenda there. And so, Elena, I don't know if you have a specific response to that particular inquiry, but I know there's some restrictions we have here.
Yeah, thank you, Mo. And I appreciate the question and the concern. The idea that, you know, you all were hoping that this improvement would happen on the roadway and that it's not. I can also understand some of the concern and questions related to that. As kind of Tiffany mentioned at the very beginning, Blueprint is really unique. It's intended to work on eliminating sanitary sewer overflows, and it's really awesome when we're able to combine roadway improvements with the elimination of sanitary sewer overflows. And unfortunately, as Bill mentioned, this area doesn't contribute to sanitary sewer overflows when we started to look in greater detail. But as Mo mentioned, it's not the end of the story for you. 311 is really where you should go. And make sure that you're communicating to the city that this is an area where a road improvement is needed and wanted. 311 works the way that you'd expect. The more that we hear from the community that there's an improvement that's necessary, the more investigation that goes into that concern. So I would suggest, you know, if you're concerned and you'd like to see a roadway improvement, please communicate with us and communicate with us through 311 so that it gets to our public service department.
Okay. Chris, I saw your follow-up there too, so that may be a new direction based on new information in terms of how the project might be able to not support it. So you may have some new efforts to report that via 311. So appreciate that follow-up as well. Any other specific questions before we talk about next steps moving forward? All right, Tiffany, why don't we go to the next slide, talk a little bit about the next steps on the project, and if there's additional questions, again, you always have the contact information there to follow up, and we're happy to answer as property specific or just questions that pop up after today for you. Tiffany, you want to take this next steps close out?
Yeah, and again, thank you guys for attending and listening, and we want to make sure that all of your neighbors, you know, that want this information can get it. So these next steps are for you, for your neighbors, for out, that these are things you need to go forward. So what we're going to do next is take everything that people are commenting on and the feedback we're getting and bring it to the design team that's listening right now. So we also heard feedback while we were walking around marking the locations. We're compiling that. They will take that, you know, analyze it and where possible, incorporate it into, you know, the plans or at least address why some things can happen and some things can't. So we want to reply to each and every one of you that has a question offline. So keep sending us questions. If your neighbors have questions, help them out and get them to us and we'll answer them. Just to be aware, both of the teams mentioned that these project areas will have temporary easements. If you are someone that this will affect, you will be approached directly by the real estate office. So just keep an eye out, or if it's a phone call or a letter, just keep an eye out for this, that they will come straight to you and go from there with them. The plant survey. So any resident who has a right-of-way or bump out rain garden, so we're not talking about the huge or the regional size rain gardens, but the individual rain gardens. If you would like to weigh in on the plants that may go in that rain garden, we're welcome to hear what your preferences are. You can take the survey at the link that's shown, and I think Joseph will put that survey in the chat as well. Let us know what you like. We can't guarantee that every single plant you pick will be in the rain garden, but we want to know, what would you like to see? What would you not like to see? And then finally, just again, sump pumps. This is one of the best things that we can offer the residents. We know that some areas already have wet basements from rainwater. And if we can, help in any way, this is one tool that we have that accomplishes things for us and also helps residents out. So if you are even slightly interested in a sump pump, give us a call, send us an email, or go straight to that website, blueprintneighborhoods.com, and sign up, and we can get you on the list. Somebody will contact you and have an inspection, and then you can go from there and say, yeah, let's do it, or no, thank you. So I can see they're putting an email address in the chat right now. United Columbus asking, how can we get a copy of today's presentation? Yeah, if you email us, we will send you a copy. We'll also put it online so you can get it off the website here in the next week.
All right, folks, I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you so much for your attendance tonight, thoughtful questions. Almost 50 of you joined on tonight, and we appreciate you taking your Tuesday evening to learn about this project. A lot more to come, a lot more to do, but we appreciate your coordination and consideration along the way, and we look forward to continuing to provide you updates as we move toward construction. So with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks on behalf of Blueprint Columbus, and we'll see you soon. Take care.